How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hello, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
If you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it.
But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
Listeners, would you like me to tell you the little story of right hand, left hand? The story of good and evil? And I'm lifting up my left hand here. Okay. Kane. It was with this left hand that old brother Kane did drop the snow globe onto the ground. Now I'm raising my right hand. Rose. You see this sled, dear hearts? This sled has memories that run straight to the soul of man. The right hand, friends. The sled rosebud. Now watch and I'll show you the story of Citizen Kane, 1941. These fingers, dear hearts, is always a warring and a tugging, one against the other. Now watch him. Old brother left hand. Kane. He's a fighting. And it looks like Rosebud's a goner. But wait a minute. Hot dog Rosebud's a winning. Yes, sirree, it's Rosebud that won. And old left hand Kane is down for the count because today we're talking the Night of the Hunter, 1955.
Okay, so real quick, listeners, Max surprises me with these every week, and
I type them in white text, and then right as Parker says better than Citizen Kane, I highlight it so that we can both read it.
So I see this in real time, and usually it's a little blurb, and I'm excited to see what he does. He highlights it, and it is a block of text this time. I don't even register what it is I'm looking at. I'm just like, what is he doing? And then it clued in.
It doesn't work in the audio medium. But I thought it would be funny.
It's funny. It's very funny. Well done.
Well, yeah, that was a reference to today's film, The Night of the Hunter, for those of you who don't know. I think for the most part, people who listen to our show that I've talked to just skip the ones if they haven't seen the movie.
That's what I've gathered, yeah.
So I don't think we're gonna lose anybody there, but
no.
Night of the Hunter, Parker.
Night of the Hunter.
1955.
Hi,
Robert Mitchum in a role that was very different from his previous roles.
Mm-hmm.
As I understand it, kind of doing a Vertigo here.
Yeah, a little bit.
And he's really good in it.
He's really
real scary guy. Parker, you have an interesting history with this movie. Why don't you get into that?
Yeah, so I watched this movie for the first time when I was not super young, but I think I was 12 or 13. And I watched it, and it scared me so bad because, as we've already established before, I'm sitting at home alone in my room at night watching on my computer.
Watching film classics
In the dark. And I'm watching this probably close to midnight, and they I don't know, just got under my skin. Really, really freaked me out. I finished the whole thing. I watched it. But I think I just blocked it out. I knew I had seen this movie. I remembered almost nothing about it other than moments and images. And then last year, you came to me and said, hey, you should watch this movie. Which kind of led in there. So I'll finish up mine, but you fill in the gap. What's your history of this movie?
So this was one of those movies that, again, it was at a time, I think it was September, October of 2021. That year, 2021 is the year that I started watching movies, capital W, capital M. Mm-hmm. One day I was sitting at home and I just went, I'm going to watch a movie and I'm going to turn off my phone and I'm going to watch a movie. And I watched not The Night of the Hunter, but I watched There Will Be Blood. And that unlocked this desire in me to just seek out good movies and watch them. Mm-hmm. And that's when I around the time I got on Letterboxd kinda, and So anyway, I was just kind of looking for movies that were really I'd heard were good. And The Night of the Hunter was on a list. It's in the Criterion. and I was like, ooh, this sounds cool. I think I had already seen Out of the Past at that point, which also has Mitchum. And I think I was like, oh, this has Robert Mitchum in it. Cool. And I rented it and I watched it. And my dad kind of came down. He was living with my parents at the time. And he came down and he was like, oh, I'll give this a watch. And we watched it together. And at first we were kind of like, there's some performances in this that are kind of like over the top. Especially like Mrs. Spoon. And we were kind of like, oh, this is kind of weird. And then at a certain point in the movie, we both just kind of stopped laughing at it. And then at the end, I think he was like, this thing is scary and I never want to see it again. It really affected him. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. Maybe I'm misremembering. I don't know. I know he's listening. He wouldn't want me to say that.
Yeah, get him on mic.
But we were both really affected by it. And so it was like one of the first, I want to say like one of the first Criterions I bought was The Night of the Hunter. And then later, I think in 2022, I was like, hey, let's watch this. And we watched it. So, and then I guess you should finish your story, your part of the story.
Yeah. Just you brought it over and suddenly like it's such a strangely visceral experience of like watching something that lives in the back of your head for, more than a decade. Like I hadn't watched this in 14, almost 15 years. Yeah. And then suddenly like, oh no, I've seen this. I've seen this and it scared the hell out of me.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it was super fun revisiting it. And since then, like it's just been like actively living in my head rent free for the past like year.
Yeah. It's one of those. It's really good.
It's really good.
Yeah. I love that. I love that you saw this when you were a kid. I feel like, I don't know, in some ways that's the perfect age and also the worst age.
Yeah. Precisely right. Oh man. But yeah, so that's my history with the movie, and I'm very glad that you reintroduced me to it.
Yeah.
And again, like I think I even put that on my letterbox like the first time. I was like, I'm counting this as my first watch. Like I saw it, I didn't really like this is a clean slate. So
yeah, for sure. Cool. I think. Yeah. Who do you want to do the little recap that we do here?
I mean, you're welcome to, but if you'd like me
to jump in. I can do a little recap on it. Well, okay, but also, how was it watching it this time? Now that, on this watch for the show, you obviously had it more fresh in your memory. It had lived in your head, like, rent-free for a year. What was it like going back to it for this?
Really good. Really, really good. Came back to it almost exactly a year later. Like, I think you showed it to me in August, like beginning of August last year. And then I watched it, obviously end of August this year.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, very interesting. It was really good revisiting it. I think initially I had given it a 4.5, and then this watch around, there's still some things that I'm not like just rub against me a little bit, which we'll get into as we go through. But like, I think I bumped it to a 5 this time because I was just like, man, this thing is just, I don't know, it's so mesmerizing. It's so it's dreamlike and nightmare-like in such a specific way that I really love. And like knowing, having memories of it this time around and like knowing what was happening and where things were going, like it just, I don't know. I liked it a lot. And I think specifically like I really took note of the pacing this time around in an interesting way. Like that stood out to me more this time.
Yeah, I would love to hear about that. And in fact, actually, I think you should recap it. I'd like to hear you recap it if that's okay.
Yeah, by all means. Please fill in as we go because I watched this. I had just come back from like an all-day shoot, and so I was like, all right, I'm gonna watch this, and it was kind of late. I was still there, obviously. Like I was still with it. Yeah. But if there's anything I missed, please just like patch in my holes.
Yeah, we'll tag team it. Yeah, it'll be great.
So the movie opens with a very, an apt stylistic choice for the 50s, which is just kind of these floating heads in the abyss.
In space.
In space. And you've got Lillian Gish, who is talking directly to camera, speaking to a group of children, and she's telling them
5 children are also, their heads also float in.
Yeah, they're also just floating around in space. There's stars behind them. And she's basically just telling them if I remember correctly, she's telling them like, hey, you know, the Bible tells us to like beware of wolves in sheep's clothing who like appear to you.
Yeah, and like false prophets.
False prophets.
I think she ends on false prophets.
Yeah, and as she's saying this, we get like the main musical motif sting of Harry Powell, which is like this big, intense, percussive like brass. Whenever he comes around, it's this what I assume to be a helicopter shot of some kind, you know, very high up, looking down at him as he's going down the road in his little car. And we meet Reverend Harry Powell. And we're introduced to him with him. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. The opening shot is little boys playing.
Yes, there's a helicopter shot of some little boys playing around a house, and they're gonna play hide and seek. One of them goes to hide in the cellar, and then like he doesn't go in, and the other kid runs up and he goes, "What's wrong?" And then he points, and there's like the legs of a dead woman in the cellar.
Yep. Yeah. Then we cut to Harry Powell going down the road, and he's talking to himself, but he's talking to God, essentially. He's talking out loud, and he's saying, Lord, I am tired. And he's talking about how, you know, he's like, you always lead me where I need to go.
He's like, what'll it be this time? Another widow? And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah. So he killed this lady, and he kills widows, and he says like, whenever I need money, you always lead me to it. You know, a widow with a little money stowed away in the sugar bowl. Like, and it's always, I think he frames it here. He mentions it later as well, but like here, I think is the first time where he talks about like, you always lead me money to like spread your word. Like that's how he's framing this whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And then he talks about things that God hates. And he says, and there's nothing that you hate more than lace and perfume. Like womanly things, basically. Yeah. This guy hates women.
Right. And then hard cut to him in like a burlesque club.
Yeah.
Sitting in the audience.
One of those classic like Depression era burlesque clubs where it's just like a woman holding a thing. Yeah. Dancing around in a circle, and all the men are like, wow, this really gets me going.
They're just like glaring, but they're just kind of sitting there. And he's watching it, and he slips his hand into his pocket. Like he grips his hand. You see his knuckles that says hate on his hand.
On his left hand, love on his left right. But it's specifically, it frames his left here.
Yeah, and it slips his hand to his pocket, and he opens a switchblade that, you know, rips through his jacket pocket.
Yeah.
Very, very phallic.
Right, and initially symbolic. It was supposed to be, I think, through his pants. And then, I can't remember who it was on the production team was like, okay, actually, we can't do that.
Yeah, that's a little much for 1955.
It has to be in the coat pocket. Yeah. But yeah, so, you know.
Yeah, so he does that, and a police officer walks up and says, hey, are you the one driving that car outside? And he's like, yeah. And you get a wipe transition to him in court, and you find out that he stole the car, and he gets sentenced to 30 days in jail. And he's like, Harry Powell, I sentenced you to 30 days in jail. He's like, Reverend Harry Powell. And he's like, Reverend. He's like, stealing a car, picked up where you were. And he turns to the like court stenographer. He's like, Harry Powell. And he's like, you're not a reverend. You're not a man of the cloth. Like, what are you talking about?
That's really good.
And I just like, I love that first scene because it does such a good job of wrapping up how everybody, all of the adults in this movie are always missing the forest for the trees. Like, yeah, he gets arrested, but he got arrested for stealing a car when he fully was going to murder this woman on stage. Yeah. And like that happened. There's so much of that in this movie where like characters will catch him up in little lies and little things, but they're absolutely missing like the huge big picture of what a monster this guy is.
Yeah.
And I just think I think that first scene just does a really good job of like setting that up of like, okay,
totally.
He'll get a slap on the wrist, but like there is a blind eye. Like people are completely unaware of the greater atrocities that this guy is, you know, performing, which carries throughout the rest of the film. Then from there, we go and we see two little kids playing in their yard. This is John and Pearl. Mm-hmm. And as they're playing, their father pulls up in a car. Yeah, Ben Harper. He pulls up, and the first thing John says to him, he says, Pa, you're bleeding. And he's got like a big splat of blood like right in his chest, basically. And he's like, all right. He's like, where to put it? And he's holding wads of money, like just stacks and stacks of bills. And he's searching around frantically. He's like, where do I put it? He's like, but the cobblestone behind the shed. No, they'd look there. And he's trying to find all these places. And then his eye spots something off screen. He says, yeah, there, that'll do. That'll be. And we don't see where he puts it.
Yeah.
But then he stands back up and he grabs John and he says, you swear you're never going to tell. Like, swear on your life you're never going to tell. Swear that you're going to protect Pearl, watch after her. And he says, I swear, Pa. And he's like, Pearl, you swear too. You got to promise me you'll never tell where the money's hid. And she said, okay. And as they're doing all of this, the police roll up and they pull their guns out and they're like, all right, Ben, like, we don't want any trouble. Like, give themselves up. And the kids are confused and scared. And
they also say, like, drop the gun. We wouldn't want the kids hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is, like, interesting of, like, they might be alluding to Ben, but also, like, it's kind of weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's this weird sense of danger and chaos going on.
Because he also asks, where's your mother? And they go, she's out shopping. That's the first thing that he says.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, anyway.
Mom's out. And so he gives himself up and they take his gun and, forcefully, push him to the ground. And John is traumatized by this. And he's like, don't. Like, he starts, yelling, crying.
Yeah.
His dad, like, he watches them take his dad away. And they just leave him. Like, they don't do anything to, like, help the kids or, like, stick around and, like...
Yeah. Well,
as this happens, the mom
walks
shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, right at the tail end of this. And they just leave. And then you get another, like, wipe dissolve, and we see Ben in front of the same judge, and you find out that he murdered 2 men while he was robbing a bank. And he goes to the same prison, the same penitentiary that Harry Powell is at currently.
Yeah.
And they end up being cellmates. And what we gather through just kind of subtext is that somewhere in this window of them overlapping, Harry Powell finds out that, he stole some money. He finds out what he was in for.
Yeah. Well, and we open with them in the cell. We cut to Ben being asleep and talking in his sleep and saying, like, and a child shall lead them.
Mm-hmm. And he keeps asking, where's the money?
Yeah.
Where is it?
Ben wakes up and just clocks Powell because Powell's in, like, the upper bunk bed. Falls off. And they have a conversation. And Ben says, this is interesting because Ben says, he's like, the only reason I killed those people is like, the only reason I robbed the bank is he's like, I got sick of seeing kids wander in the streets because this is in the Depression. He's like, I got sick of kids starving on the streets, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
And he's like, and I promised myself I would never see my kids starve.
Yeah.
And, like, now they'll never have to. Like, that was the idea. That was the goal.
Right.
And he tells John that before he gets taken away. He's like, that money's going to be yours one day. Like, this is for you. And Powell is like, well, can you imagine? He's like, imagine what I could do with $10,000. And again, $10,000 is already a lot of money. In the Great Depression, it's a lot of money. I haven't sat down and, like, done the inflation calculation, but it's...
You haven't? You haven't just sat down with your abacus and your big old-timey calculator and done the numbers?
All right. I've been busy. But Powell he's going on and on. He's like, I could make the grandest church to the Lord and all these things, and, I'd help the children. He says, would you? Would you really? And Ben doesn't buy it for a second. Like, Ben sees through this guy.
Well, Ben even asks, like, what scripture or what religion do you preach? And Powell says, something I've worked out with the Lord just between the two of us, or something like that, right? Like, super sus vibes from this guy. And Ben is like, all right, man.
He's like, okay, dude, whatever.
And he rolls up a sock. It's really great. He's like, yeah, preacher, keep talking. And he stuffs a sock in his own mouth, and then he just goes to sleep.
So that he won't talk in his sleep. So that all happens, and then they hang Ben. Ben dies.
And then what's interesting is we follow the guard who was, like, oversaw the hanging, which was interesting. Where, like, he goes home to his wife, and she's like,
really despondent.
He's really despondent about it. And, like, I can't remember exactly what the scene, like, what he says.
He says something along the lines of, like, I think I need to quit being a guard. Like, I think I need to, like, I don't like how this is making me feel, and I want to be around for our kids or whatever. And she's like, oh, and you go back to the mine and die? Like, not on your life. Like, you're staying right here. This is much more safe and secure. Like, I know. And she's like, you only get this way after a hanging. Like, you know, she acknowledges that, like, you'll be fine. You're just, this always throws you in a funk. And it's this kind of weird little aside that sort of gets, like, it gets a resolution at the end of the movie, which we'll talk about, that feels kind of unnecessary.
It does, but also I think a key part of it is that he goes in and he looks at their kids, and it's the two kids in the bed, because this movie is very much about children.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something that's obviously very important that they linger on, is like him looking at his kids.
It kind of implies that, like, the real reason he's having a tough time with this is that he just, you know, hung a father, and he's like, oh, you know, this guy had kids, and now they don't have a dad anymore.
Yeah, but it is like an interesting, and like what the resolution is later, you're still like, that's it, all right.
Yeah, you're like, okay, weird.
Okay, yeah.
In any case, we go back and visit the kids in the hometown, and the mothers pulled them out of school because the school children are just having a field day with this. They all
singing
sit around.
songs about hanging.
They draw little chalk figures on the brick walls of, you know, hangmen, nooses, and everything, and just like, we're just really being terrible to these two children who just lost their father.
Yeah.
And like even the adults in the town, as they see them, are like, everybody's asking, like, did you ever find out what your, you know, that thieving father of yours did with the money? Like, everybody hates Ben around here. And it just sucks. It sucks for these poor children. And obviously their mother is completely distraught and doesn't know what to do. And she confides in the town busybody, Mrs.
Spoon.
Who's such a funny character.
Just the worst lady.
She's
but she's so funny.
She has lots of really, really good little
and her we'll get
bits.
to Walt Spoon.
We'll get to Walt Spoon.
but yeah, so they are pulled out of school, the kids, right?
Yep. And they go to the ice cream parlor run by the Spoons. There's these there's these like little moments of, like, when they stop, they're looking at like a watch in the window that John really likes, and like Pearl asks if they can get ice cream, and there's these moments of like John thinking about it, and then he's like, no, we can't do that. And I hadn't clocked it until this watch that, like, he's wanting to spend the money.
Right.
Like, he knows he has it, and he's like, I could buy anything. I could get a watch. I could get us ice cream right now. But like, he's trying to be an adult. He's trying to be the man of the house now.
Yeah. At like age 9 or 10 or however old he is. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally.
Which I hadn't fully clocked that until this most recent
me
watch,
neither. Yeah.
Which I just thought was really interesting. What were you laughing about?
Oh, I was just going to make a stupid bit. I was just going to say, of course, Big Spoon owns the ice cream parlor. Of course. Anyway.
That's funny. So they pop into the ice cream parlor, and their mom, Willa, is talking to Mrs. Spoon, and Mrs. Spoon is giving her a hard time. Like, you can't be a single mother. Like, you have children to take care of. Like, you need a man around. You need somebody to take care of things. And she's like, I'm not in any rush to get married again. Like, I am pretty upset about all of this. This is all still very, very fresh for me.
Yeah.
I think they have another one of those, like, it's funny the first time you watch it, and then, like, as it goes on and does this more and more, like, again, kind of like you were talking about your experience with your dad, like, you kind of get in with it a little bit more of Mrs. Spoon has some line about, like, well, you know, you've just got to be open to it. Like, the Lord's going to bring you the right man. And then it hard cuts to a train with the ominous music of Harry Powell. Boom, boom, boom.
And the train's like on its way, and it's got like the smoke billowing out. It's a great shot of the train.
It's a great shot of the train. It's just that cut specifically is kind of funny.
It is.
Just like, you'll find the right man. It's like, the devil is on his way.
Yeah. And then it cuts back to them, and she's like, I don't know, or something else. There's like other stuff. It cuts back to them, and then she's like, well, you know, whatever, the Lord will provide. And then it cuts back to the train. It's like, bomb, bomb, and like the train's getting closer. Yeah.
So that night, John tells Pearl a story because she says she can't sleep, and he tells her a story about a king who is taken away and leaves his son and his daughter gold, and, you know, gives them an order to defend the treasure and all this stuff. And as he's saying this, there's, again, this movie's use of lighting. We're going to talk about it later. I have so much to say about this. But like, as he's saying this, you get the crispest profile silhouette of Harry Powell's like
with his
flat
hat.
brim hat and his face at the window behind him.
Like huge blown up across the room. And Pearl like shocked, like is shocked and points at it. And John goes and looks out the window, and I'm getting chills talking about it. And he's just standing outside at like the corner fence of the property.
Yeah, he's like leaning against a lamppost, looking at the window.
And then he starts singing, leaning on the everlasting arms. It is slow little melody that he does.
It's terrifying.
And John just goes, "Oh, it's just a man."
Yeah,
and then he climbs into bed, and I'm like, John.
And like the thing. And I'll get into more of this later, but like the thing that I love about like that two shot of like his shadow on the wall, John goes to the window and we see like John's POV looking down. The way that he is standing, there is no logical way his shadow makes it up that direction. Like it doesn't make any logical sense with the lighting, but you go with it. Like it's so stylized and thematic, and there's so much of that in this movie that like it doesn't matter. Like it's I'm gonna misattribute exactly where all of this is coming from, but there's a story. I think it was on the set of Schindler's List. Don't quote me on this exactly. Somebody asks the DP, says, "Well, where is that light coming from? That doesn't make sense. Like, where is that coming from?" He says, "Same place the music's coming from."
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I
sure also don't remember exactly.
I'm misattributing it, but
it's another one of those
a
thoughts
story
from like the internet hive mind that we all have, but we don't remember where it came from.
Exactly. Yeah, but you know what I'm talking about. Like,
I do, because I love that
film set. Yeah,
I love that, and like that's, I don't know, like this movie is such a testament to filmmaking as a visual medium. Like again, we've talked about that. We talked about it with like Metropolis and some others of like. Is black and white filmmaking in a lot of ways, and like they talk about a lot of like silent film, like is this kind of like the peak of like the visual medium aspect of filmmaking? And I love this movie for that. Like you're saying, like there's no way, and like I would hate if I was showing this movie to somebody and they went, "Well, that doesn't make sense. Where's that shadow coming?" I'm like,
shut up.
If someone said that, I'm like, I'm turning the movie off and you're leaving my house. Like, it's good. It's really good, and once you settle into it with like, I think that train is kind of like the first time we really get like really heavy with it, like heavy-handed with it. It's like, oh, once you understand what this is, like you're in. Yeah, you're in. And I think that again, that two shot you're talking about is just really good, because even when he looks down and Powell's in complete silhouette standing there too, some great shots of this house. We'll get into that, but yeah, I love that introduction of him to the children. I'm just saying that when I was 10, if I looked out my window and there was a man standing there, I might be like, what's he doing there?
It's like, what is he doing down there?
He's like, it's just a man.
It's just a guy. I don't know.
I guess it was a different time.
Yeah. So the next day, John goes and visits his friend, Uncle Bertie, who lives out on a houseboat. And Uncle Bertie...
Just an old man.
Yep, just an old man, and he lives by himself. His wife's been dead for 25 years. He has a little picture of her.
He has a great bit with that, though. Is that later, or is that in this scene?
No, that's the first one. It's the first scene.
Where he's like, "Hey, John, like, do you want like a coffee?" He gets him a coffee.
Yeah, you want
or something,
some coffee?
And then he's like, "Hope you won't mind if I sweeten it a little bit." And he goes over to put alcohol in it, and he looks at the picture of his wife, and he's like, "I've been gone these 25 years. She's still looking over me." And he puts the picture down and then pours it into, and it's just really nice.
It's a good little bit.
Just a really old man who is taking care of Ben Harper's skiff.
Right. That's
his fishing boat.
Yeah. The thing that's established here is that Ben Harper has a little fishing boat that's being repaired. And he's like, it'll be ready within like a week.
Yeah.
But that's, John goes and hangs out with him. And Bertie is one of the only nice adults in this town. Like, he seems to be like one of the only people who actually like, he seems to genuinely care about John, and it kind of asks how he's doing. And John is very standoffish in the way, little boys are about their feelings. And he's like, I'm fine. I got to take care of Pearl. I got to do this and that. Like, that's where he's finding, like, he's getting through his trauma and his grief by assuming that role of like, well, Dad told me to step up, and this is what I need to do, and I need to take care of my little sister.
Yeah, it does crack me up that like every scene with Bertie, Bertie's like, John, you leaving already? He's like, gotta go look after Pearl. Like every time we cut to this, John's just wrapping up his time with Birdie, and he's like, "I gotta go, Birdie. I gotta take care of Pearl.
Leave.
I'm a man."
So he heads home, and as he does, he passes by the Spoon's ice cream parlor, and he sees Reverend Powell in there with his mother and his sister.
Yeah, and the Spoons.
And the Spoons. And he's talking about how it's a really nice reversal because, like, I think the first thing that, like, they say when he gets in is there's some line dropped of, like, you knew Ben in prison. He's like, oh, yes. And, like, at first you're like, they're chill with this? Like, they're all cool? Like, it gives you probably, like, a minute of their conversation where it is entirely framed as just, he got out of prison and now he's coming and talking to these people. He's like, oh, I knew your husband. And then you find out the switch is like somebody's asking, well, how long ago did you resign from the prison? He's like, just last week. I couldn't take it anymore.
Right, which also kind of brings back the little aside with the guard of, like, maybe Powell, like, I don't know, it kind of puts that idea in our heads so that maybe Powell's explanation makes a little more sense.
Sure.
Of, like, why a guard would leave the prison, that sort of thing. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, he explains basically, I used to work at the prison, then I resigned.
Yeah, he's like, I ministered to your husband in his last days.
Right, that's
or
what it
whatever.
was. Yeah.
And while he's there, somebody takes note of his knuckle tattoos. I can't remember who.
I think John does. John looks at his knuckles and he says, "Oh, you're looking at my knuckles, little lad. Well."
Yeah, let me tell you. And he goes into this monologue, which Max did a wonderful job, a wonderful rendition at the beginning.
Interpolating it.
And I think this is probably the most iconic thing from the movie. This gets riffed on a lot.
Yeah.
Specifically, it's very overtly referenced in Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing, where in lieu of knuckle tattoos, they have brass knuckles that say love and hate. And one of the characters monologues to the camera about the story of right hand, left hand. It's really good.
Yeah.
But that's kind of one of, like, the lasting impacts of this movie is this whole monologue he has. And everybody's enamored with him. Like, Mrs. Spoon loves this guy, and she's like, oh, we need a good, righteous preacher man in our community. Like, you have to come to our picnic this Sunday. Like, stick around.
She doesn't just say picnic. She goes, we're having a picnic.
Yeah, the way that she says it, that specific line.
You gotta come to the picnic.
Yep. John immediately dislikes him.
Yep.
John has this, like, sense of just knowing this guy is up to no good.
Yeah.
That carries on through the rest of this. At the picnic, Mrs. Spoon tries to, like, set up Willa and the Reverend. And she's like, he's such a nice man. Like, you know, he's so good with the little ones. You should give him a chance and all this stuff. She's like, I don't know. Like, I can't stop thinking about this money. Like, where did it go? And she's like, it doesn't matter where it went. It's gone. You don't know where it is, do you? And she's like, no, I have no idea where it is. She's like, well, then stop worrying about it. Like, you're letting this thing eat you alive. Forget about it.
Yeah.
And she goes and she talks with the Reverend, and she's suddenly so much happier afterwards.
She calls, like, John over.
Yeah, she calls John over, and she's like, I want you to tell John what you just told me. And he's like, well, your father told me in the cell exactly where that mariner was buried. And John gets kind of nervous for a second. He's like, yeah, he did. And he's like, oh, yes, he did. He said, he told me that it's, you know, down at the bottom of the river, like, you know, wrapped, big old stone wrapped around it. He tossed it in. And John just, like, smirks. John's like,
he, like, openly just, like,
he's like, you don't know. You think you know, but you don't. Also, I can't breeze over one of the best jokes in this movie is during this scene. The rest of the party is hanging out by the picnic table while Willa and Powell are talking. And Mrs. Spoons is doing her whole busybody thing and telling everybody about all this stuff. And she's like, everybody thinks love matters, but it doesn't. It doesn't matter at all. And do you happen to have the exact phrase?
I want to pull it up. Let me see if I can find it.
It's so funny. While you're looking for that, I'll keep setting the table, which is just, she's telling people that, like, love don't matter. It's about, you know, what you put into it, and it's about the fact that, like, you know, you're still around. She's like, you learned that after 25 years. She's like, you know, take me and my my husband.
Also, we forgot to mention that her first name is Icy. Her name is Icy Spoon, and she works at the ice cream parlor. Which I guess if you married someone named Spoon and your name were Icy, you'd probably go, I guess I can only work in ice cream.
I have a thesis about this film that ties into later. So bring that back up. That is further evidence to my claim.
So I'm looking at some quotes from Icy Spoon from this movie. And there's another really good one later that we'll also bring up, which is really funny. But Icy Spoon says about sex in marriage, he says this: "A woman's a fool to marry for that. That's something for a man. The good Lord never meant for a decent woman to want that. Not really want it. It's all just a fake and a pipe dream," is what she says. And then we cut back to like Harry Powell and Willa and John and whatever. And then we cut back to Icy Spoon. And then she says this: "When you've been married to a man for 40 years, you know all that don't amount to a hill of beans. I've been married to Walt that long, and I swear in all that time, I just lie there thinking about my canon." And then it cuts to Walt Spoon also at the table, and he just kind of he just
deflates slightly.
He depresses ever so slightly, like he's holding something on a fork, and he just kind of goes. It's so funny.
It's really funny.
And Walt Spoon is like the low key MVP of this movie. That he's so funny.
He's so
just
great.
like Herbie, I swear, and all that time I just lie there thinking about my canning. Yeah. And Walt just.
It's incredible.
It's incredible stuff.
I couldn't move past this scene without bringing that up.
Yeah. Also, one other thing Icy does say in that same scene, it's listed here. She says, "A husband's one piece of store goods you never know until you get it home and take the paper off." just incredible stuff.
Great stuff from Icy Spoon.
Great stuff from Icy Spoon. And then they cut back to the house, right? Like they go back with John and Powell.
I believe so. Yeah. So John goes and has he goes and visits Uncle Bertie again.
Right.
And I think he's just walking home. I don't know that you get an interaction with Uncle Bertie, but he goes past the parlor and he sees his mom and Icy celebrating together. She gives him a big hug and he's very happy. And when he gets home, Powell corners him and he's like, "Your mother told me that I should be the one to give you the good news. We're going to be married, boy. We're going down tomorrow. And, when we come back, we're going to be husband and wife, and I'm going to be your dad." And he's like, "You're never going to be my dad." And he's like, "Well, hey, we need to get along with each other." And he's like, "You think I'm going to tell, but I won't. I won't." He's very firm, and he's like, "Tell me what?" And he does that little kid thing, nothing at all. And he
nice save, John.
You saved it. You saved it, John. You did it. But that kind of establishes the dynamic moving forward. He talks with Pearl, and Pearl's like, "I love Mr. Powell. I love him lots and lots." And he's like, "Well, we can't tell him. You swore to Dad." And she's like, "Well, I don't care. I like him." And she's just so young that she doesn't understand.
She's 4 or 5, something like that.
Pretty much. I would say
really
4 or
young.
5. Really young. Then we cut to the night of the honeymoon, and Willa is wearing the tamest of tame negligees. It's a nightgown that shows nothing. It's just, but
she thinks she looks really sexy.
Yeah. This is not a slight at Willa. This is just context for the reaction.
I don't know, Park. It sounds like you were like, this nightgown shows nothing.
It's just not even hot. I don't know, man. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh no, it's the worst guy ever.
Oh God,
I didn't know he was our guest on the show.
No. And she comes out, and the Reverend is just rolled over. Powell is he's just not even acknowledging her. And she tries talking to him. He's like, "I was praying." She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know." And he gives her this lecture. He's like, you thought you were going to come in here. He's like, "Let's get something clear." He's like, "Our marriage is a joining of spirits and of souls. I'm not interested in any of these." He's like, "Women's bodies are made for bearing children. Do you want more children?" And she says, "No." He's like, "Well, all right then." He's like, "Go look at the mirror." He's like, "Look at it. Look at yourself." And just really psychologically torments this poor woman. It's "You're filth. You are the scum of the earth. How dare you think that you can come in here and try to seduce me with your lust, and that's not going to happen in this marriage."
And he says your job now is to take care of the 2 children you already have. That's your only job.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
It sucks. And it sucks even more because her immediate response to this is, help me be clean. Help me be what John wants me to be.
Yeah.
And it's just like
Harry.
Harry.
Yeah.
Harry.
Yeah.
And it's insane how quickly she just completely
Right.
buys into
from
this.
there, on their honeymoon trip, he's like preaching to a church. And now she's part of his
she's
act.
fanatic. Yeah,
and
she's
it's like fanatic and just
she's going on and on. She's like, how many of you can say that you drove a man to murder? Like I did. I'm a terrible person and I'm begging for salvation. Like I need the Lord. And
and the lighting on this in this scene's really cool too, because we cut to like the crowd, like the what would you call that in a church? The congregation. Cut the congregation. There's like some people in light, but like there's 2 rows in the back that are just completely silhouetted. Yeah. And they're all like cheering and chanting.
And they're burning torches.
They're burning torches too. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
very
wild.
Yeah, very fanatic.
Yeah. So you go and John and Uncle Bertie are fishing out on the newly repaired boat. And while they're out there, Bertie tells John, he said, hey, congrats on your new paw. How are you feeling about it? He's like, I don't know. And he's like, I don't know much what to think about him either. Like, there's a few people, and you get that a little bit with Walt later on too, where some people aren't fully buying into what's up with Powell. They're like, something's off about this guy.
Yeah.
And so he just tells John, he's like, if you're ever in trouble, if you need help, like you come to Uncle Bertie. Like I'll make sure you get what you need. And he's like, thanks, Uncle Bertie. He's like, I gotta get home. And he gets back, and the next night we finally get the reveal of what's going on with the money. And it's just, again, such a lovely little kid thing. If you see all the money strewn out and you see the back of Pearl's doll, which she has been carrying around the entire movie, this doll never leaves her side, is opened up and all the money's coming out of it. And that's where the money's been hidden. And she's got a pair of scissors and she's making paper dolls out of these like $100 bills.
Yeah.
It's just, I just love that.
It's really good, like panning across it and like revealing her cutting. And she's just like, just making them. John comes out. He's like, Pearl, no.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Trying his best to keep everything together. And then they start shoving the money back in.
And the way the shot is framed is so tense because in the foreground, you've got the kids on the ground with the money. Behind them is the porch with like a screen door.
Yeah, and the light coming from the house from inside.
And suddenly Powell steps out and he's behind the screen door. He's like, children, time for bed. You better
get
on
I hate
inside.
The way he says children, by the way.
He
says it a few more times later. Hate it. Anyway, so he's like,
just makes your skin crawl.
It's time for bed. And he's like, John, what are you doing out there? And he's like, just getting Pearl ready.
Yeah.
Getting Pearl ready for bed. What's taking you so long? And he's like, she left her things out. Mom would hate it if when she leaves her things out. And as they're trying to stuff all this money back in to the doll, Powell is coming out of the door.
He starts walking out, and the money's still on the ground, and you're just sitting there like biting your nails as the audience. You're just like, oh my god! Yeah, and they just happen to get like the last bill stuffed in.
Well, but I also love is as he walks up, 2 bills on the ground. I don't know if you notice this, blow past him and under the porch of the house. Like he doesn't see 2 bills that just go past him on the ground. It's really great.
It's so good.
Gets but there, he
managed to get it.
Yeah.
Takes him inside. And then
there's also a scene in here. This whole section's kind of a blur for me. There's also a scene in here where Willa talks to John and says, Mr. Powell said that you or that John told his mom that Powell was asking about the money.
Yeah, because I think it's the same scene with the money and the doll. He stops John before bed and he says, "You tattled on me, like you told." And he's like, that's supposed to be, you're not supposed to be telling that. You told your mom that I've been asking where that money is, even though I told her I knew where it was. It's like, it doesn't matter. It's my word against yours. Like, she'll believe me. Which
is a huge theme of the movie also, of like adults not believing children.
Yeah, adults will always believe other adults before they believe children, which is just so integral to this and just breaks your heart as you're watching all of this.
Yeah.
You then get a scene where... some time has passed. It's kind of a blur of like how long this has all been. A few weeks, I would imagine. But Willa is like, why are you telling that lie? Like, why do you keep telling that lie that he's been asking you about the money? It's not true. Like, you know where the money is. He told you where the money is. Like, why can't you be nice to him? Why can't you two get along? And, you know, just showing the rift that, I mean, it's such a good, it's a really good illustration of like the natural tensions that occur between like mixed families and like, you know, broken homes and stuff like that. When somebody new comes in, a lot of the times, like, you know, children have a hard time with that. And, you know, these parents are just like, I love you and I love him. Like, can you please just like, I need you to like him. I need these two parts of my world to, you know, mesh together. But this is like such an extreme version of it. It's like, yeah, but the kid's right to not trust him this time. Like, there are so many actual reasons for this. But I just think that's really good. So this also gets a little bit blurry for me as well. At a certain point, Powell comes and interrogates John again, and he makes some slip up of like, Pearl, don't say anything, don't tell him. Which clues him into, oh, Pearl knows now. And he's like, well, John is a troublemaker. John, let's keep this between you and me, Pearl.
Is that after Willa?
Yes, that's after the conversation with Willa. Because
no, I mean, is that after like what happens with Willa?
No, this is because so he takes her downstairs, locks John in his room, and Willa comes home and she hears them through the kitchen window, him asking about the money. And then he gets really aggressive.
And he says, like, I'm going to tell me where it is. I'm gonna, your arm off. I'm going to rip your arm off.
Yeah. And she screams and runs away right as Willa comes in, and he kind of puts his mask on. But she's already heard everything. And she's trying to keep it all together as much as she can. She's like, okay, baby, let's get you to bed. But like, is clearly shaken when she realizes, like, oh, John was telling the truth, and Powell has been lying to me. Yeah. And like, ugh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, because then we go into one of my favorite scenes. It's an awful scene, but one of my favorites in the film of Willa in bed lying there. And again, that lighting thing of she is like illuminated while she's lying in bed. Like there's almost a halo around her. And she's like, John was true. And Harry's in the room with her and she's like, John was right. Like you are here for the money, like that sort of thing. Right. And Powell, do you want to talk? Sorry.
So like, so she's saying all this stuff and she's kind of like in a daze. Like she's just she is almost in denial, but like she's saying the truth. She's like, okay, like you know where, you didn't know where the money was. You lied. And she's like, but that's okay. Like we can still be a happy family. We can still work this out or whatever. And you get this shot of like a wide and she's lying in bed with like this streak of light coming in. There's just like harsh angled shadows. The bedroom, I don't know that it's ever established where it is in the house, but like it looks almost like an attic because it comes to like a steeple point.
Well, it also looks like a chapel.
Up. Yeah, it looks like a chapel in there. And Powell is standing in the corner and he's doing this weird like it's grasping motion.
It's his left hand. Right? It's hate is rising up and he's like grasping up towards like the moonlight coming in through the window. And then she says something right at the end and he brings it back down.
Yeah. And he pulls out his
knife.
He gets on top of her. He like straddles her in bed and she closes her eyes and like knows what's going to happen pretty much.
And then he brings the knife down and we cut to John in his room in the middle of the night. And he hears the car trying to start, the car starting, and he goes and he looks out and it's too dark to see anything.
Yeah.
Right? Is that kind of...
he hears the car starting
and driving
and he goes
away.
back to bed.
Yeah.
The next morning we jump over to the Spoons and Icy tells Walt, she's like, Mr. Powell's in there, like falling all to pieces. Willa ran away. Willa's gone. She left in the middle of the night. Yeah. And he's putting on his big show, Crocodile Tears. And before this, there was some scene I missed where we established that Walt says something to Icy about like, I don't know, something isn't adding up to me about him. And she's like, you're paranoid. Get over yourself. Like, this isn't a big deal. But we've established that already. Yeah. So Powell is sitting there blubbering the whole time. And he says that Willa turned him down on their honeymoon night, that she turned him out of the bed, didn't want to be physical with him. And Icy just buys into his
Icy
bullshit
is eating that
completely.
shit up.
She is all in on this. Walt is still, he's kind of like, well, didn't she leave a note?
Yeah, he's kind of inquisitive. He's like,
yeah, he's like, she didn't say anything before she left. He's like, nope. No, she's like, she left a note and I burned it. Like I couldn't stand the sight of it.
He's like, I couldn't stand like these evil words.
Mm-hmm.
And Icy's like, as you should, as is normal.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, what are you gonna do now? He's like, the only thing I can do, I'm gonna stay here and take care of those children. And you cut
what a
to,
good man.
What a good man. And you cut to freaking the bottom of the river, and it just kind of pans over, and you see the rear bumper of the car, and then it keeps going, and you just see freaking Willa's lifeless body like tied into the seat, and her hair is just billowing up around her, and she just looks like a ghost.
She's at the bottom of the river, and it's so effective.
It's a haunting.
It's a haunting image. It's real spooky.
Ooh, yeah, it's real spooky. And so, you know, fully confirming what we all suspected and what's happened to Willa.
Yeah.
And this is, I think we just get that reveal.
No, I think
Does Birdie, is it all in the same scene?
Yeah, I think so.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So a fish hook comes down. Yes,
thank you. That's right. Mm-hmm.
And is like dangling through, and then kind of catches on the arm of the mirror, like one of the side mirrors. And Birdie is fishing, and he's like trying to reel this in, and he looks over the edge of the boat, and he sees it, and it's clear as day.
Yeah, like
just at the bottom of there's no murkiness.
Yeah, it's not a deep river at all. Like she's maybe like 10, 15 feet down.
Yeah, and he
you can
sees
just see her, and he just is horrified.
Yeah. I don't think we quite go into yet his full reaction.
No, not yet. Just the reveal.
Just the reveal that he sees.
We go back to the house, and Powell is calling for the children, and you get this fun like silent era iris.
Yes, I love it so much.
He's walking around the house, and then this iris happens, and it goes in and focuses in on like a window from the cellar of the two kids kind of peeking out. And it's just, I don't know, it's a very fun stylistic choice.
It is. It's very fun. Because we open with him leaning against something and going, children, or whatever, and then he starts walking towards the house.
Yeah.
And the iris closes in, and then we cut to the actual full shot of just their faces in the window of the cellar.
Yep. So they're down in the cellar, and are hiding from him. He corners them. He opens up the door, and he's like, I can hear you breathing down there. Like, come on out. I'm liable to get an anger. Like, I can feel an anger boiling. Like, you should come on up. And he's interrupted by Icy calling for him. And she's there. And he's like, oh, the children down the cellar. I'm at my wit's end. She's like, children, you get up here right now. You mind your paw. And they come up, and they're, you know, covered in dirt or whatever. While they're down there, John like knocks into a wall, and he sees a shelf of jars like wiggle, like it's loose.
Yep.
And so he kind of clocks that before they head up.
Yeah.
They go upstairs. After she leaves, Powell just she brings dinner for them. That's what it is. She brings dinner. He lays out this dinner that night, and it's just, you know, apple cobbler and fried chicken and delicious food. And they're sitting on one side of the table, and he's sitting on the other, just enjoying his meal. And he's like, are you hungry? And they're like, yeah. He's like, well, you can tell me, you can have as much food as you like as soon as you tell me where that money is. Just again, tormenting these children.
Yeah.
It's awful, awful stuff. And they're there, and then it cuts back to Uncle Birdie that night, and he is drunk. He's drinking because he's convinced. He's like, if I go to the police, they're gonna think I did it,
right?
Because nobody, like, I'm basically a hobo living on the river.
Yeah, he's a drunkard living on the river that no one would ever trust or believe.
And so he's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, and he's just despondent about it.
Yeah, he's drinking a lot. So then we go back.
We go back to Powell, and he threatens Pearl with a knife, and then John lies, and he says, well, the money is hidden under stone in the cellar. Like, leave her alone. I know where it is. And he said, oh, okay. He's like, well, then come on. And John didn't calculate for this. He's like, what? He thought maybe he could just like lock him in the cellar or something. He's like, you're coming with me.
Yeah.
So he leads the two kids down into the dark cellar, and he's like, all right, show me where it is. You show it to me. And he's making sure. He's like, nope, you walk in front of me. You stay where I can see you. And he's like, it's over yonder. It's right there. Pointing directly below that shelf that he spotted earlier. Ruffles around in the dirt, and he says, this is concrete. Like, what are you talking about, a stone in the cellar? And realizes the kids are lying to him.
Well, and Pearl says, John told a lie. John sinned. At which point he's like, I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to hurt you real bad.
Yeah, he grabs John, he pushes him down on top of a barrel, and he takes the knife and he puts it like in his ear, I think.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. He's like, oh, well, this is what's gonna happen to you. And he's like, he says, I'm going to like split you nose to sternum basically and bleed you out like a pig.
Yeah.
Like if you don't tell me what's going on. Pearl starts to cry and she's like, it's in the doll, leave him alone.
And this is also a really good delivery from Robert Mitchum where he goes, the doll. Like he has like such like a like the doll, of course.
Yeah,
like
of course it's there.
And it's just a really fun delivery in this awful scene.
It's terrible. So he's just below the shelf. John throws something and knocks the shelf down, and all the jars fall on Powell's head. And kind of discombobulated for a minute. The kids run up the stairs. You get this like Frankenstein monster like up the stairs behind them. He's got his hands out like reaching for them with like
chases
crooked
them up the
fingers.
Stairs. Yeah.
They manage to get away. They slam his fingers in the door.
And he makes like the most Tom and Jerry ass like yow, and then like pulls his hand back. They shut the door. They lock it. And then he's like, I'm going to bust this door down. And they run. They
go running into the night, and you still hear the sounds of the door getting busted in as they're running away. And then you hear it break down.
Yeah.
And they're just running, and they go to Uncle Bertie's, and he's passed out drunk. Yeah. And John is just shaking him. He's like, you told me to come. You told me if I needed help. Like, we need your help. He's coming with a knife. You've got to hide us. And Bertie's just gone. He's can't.
He's out.
Barely conscious. And it's just... It makes me want to cry every time I get to that scene of just like children in distress and not having adults to go to just like wrecks me. It just is so upsetting to watch this happen. And John is trying to think on his feet, and he says, okay, the boat, like we'll get Dad's boat. And so they go and they run down the river, and you hear Powell just yelling after him this whole time. Children. They, get the boat out of the weeds, and it's kind of like a swampy area. Like it's full of mud and stuff. And he gets Pearl in the boat, and he's pushing it out. Just as he does, like Powell shows up with his knife.
Stumbles in the mud.
Stumbles in the mud. He's wading through the swamp, and he just misses them as they get into like deep water, and he can't follow them anymore.
He lets out a scream that is unreal.
It's insane. It grows from a growl into just like this howling sound that he makes. It's
nuts.
It's wild. It's insane, the sound he gets to come out of his throat of just like pure rage that these children and the money have gotten away. And the kids float down the river in the boat. And you get this like storybook sequence as Pearl sings.
It's gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Oh my God. It's absolutely beautiful.
She sings this song about this mother fly who dies, has two baby flies who are on their own and have to like be on their own and escape basically. As she's singing this, there's this really great shot of in the foreground a spider's web and the boat with the two children in it float away from the web, like in the background.
It's like an overhead shot, like it's looking down at them as it just kind of like goes and glides across.
Well, and like it's just like this really good like visual and like sound storytelling of like, well, obviously we know they're the flies, but then also showing them like escape this web they were trapped in. It's really good. There's like a shot of a frog, just like storybook stuff, and like it's such a fake stage. Like it's
totally
like when
it's
they
a soundstage with water on.
When they float away in the river, you can see the two different jets creating the currents, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Like it feels so of a piece with itself.
There's this sense of like sequence. this dream-like quality and like this unreality that at this point you've completely settled into. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, just like it's so visually stunning that it's literally the DVD menu on the Criterion.
Yeah.
Like it's just those gorgeous shots of like these woodland animals and the spider's web and the boat just going down the river and just like there's just something so hauntingly beautiful about this whole sequence.
Yeah. Well, and also again like the black and white and the lighting of this whole movie is just incredible.
Yeah.
We
get a little bit of a montage. Oh wait, before that, the next morning, the Spoons get some sort of postcard saying, "Oh hey, I'm taking the kids up to go visit like my sisters or whatever. And
thought a change of scenery would do us all some good.
yeah. And they're like, that's weird that he's saying say goodbye or whatever.
Well,
and
Icy says, well, there you have it, Walt. You were so worried disappearing in the middle of the night that, that you were so worried that they, had been killed by, using the slur, like gypsies, that sort of thing. And
he says, well, somebody stole a horse and they never caught him.
Yeah.
He's like, I had a reason to worry.
The people who did that. Yeah. Someone shot a farmer and stole a horse. We cut to another helicopter shot, maybe, of Powell on a horseback just going across the countryside.
Yeah, again,
setting up
this
chase.
Sting.
Yeah, setting up this chase kind of going on. We get some shots of in this montage we get John and Pearl go up to this woman who's just handing out potatoes to children. Because again, this plays off of what Ben was talking about earlier of the Depression. You just have these gaggles of children just roaming the countryside without parents, just homeless and trying to survive. And John and Pearl, ironically, due to what Ben thought he was doing by leaving the money, he has kind of condemned them to this at this moment. We get Powell stopping at a little he's working to make money, and he's is he working at
they're picking some sort of
they're picking peaches or something.
Peaches, it's an orchard. They're picking peaches,
and he's preaching to them.
Kids keep floating down the river. At a certain point, John's like, all right, we're gonna sleep on land tonight. They pull the boat up to this farmhouse that's right on the edge of the river.
This, more than anything else in the movie, feels so dreamlike and unreal. Just this house and this barn in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, just
one
emptiness.
Window with a light on, and in that window is a bird cage with a bird inside.
Yeah,
that's just fluttering around, and just that shot of the barn and the house just feels so weirdly, eerily familiar to me. Not like I've had a dream with that exact image, but it just has such a they are alone in the world.
Absolutely, it's got this unreality
empty.
To it.
Yeah, they go up into the barn, and they go to sleep for the night. And then, do you want to talk about this shot?
John is woken up by the
dog barking.
The dog barking, and then he goes to the loft window of the barn. He looks out, and then he just starts hearing the sound of Powell's singing. Leaning on the everlasting arm, and you get this crazy cool shot of Powell in silhouette on horseback, just riding along what looks like, is it sunrise at this point? Is that what that would be? Is that what's illuminating him?
I don't know, I guess, but it's just a hill that he's on the top of. It's a hill, and there's a little bit
of light coming behind it so that he is fully silhouetted. And you get this great shot of John leaning against the window in the foreground, and all the way in the background, in deep focus, you can see both of them. Is just this silhouette on the horizon of him on his horse, just
going
left
along, to right, singing
to himself.
And John, and I want to talk about the actor playing John, because he is doing a pretty good job.
I think so.
For a 1955 child actor. Earlier, you kind of moved past it when he's in Birdie's shack, and he has this moment where Birdie's knocked out, and he goes, "There's still Dad's fishing boat." There's a really good moment of discovery from him there. There's a really good realization from him there. And not everything he does is going to be great, but that, and then this line here where he just says, "Don't he ever sleep?" Is just really well delivered.
Again, there is. Yeah, I'll get into it later. There's so much I want to talk about. Just that idea. Don't he ever sleep? Okay.
So the kids,
we gotta keep it clipping.
Yeah, we gotta keep it clipping. So they rush back down to the boat, and they head back down the river some more. They wake up, and someone is just yelling at them and poking at them.
Yeah,
and it's I'm gonna get me a switch. Get yourselves out of that boat. Come on up. Rushes them over to this garden where some other girls are working, and they're we got these two kids, and they take them to, where do they take them, Parker?
They take them inside. They take them into this woman's house, and they clean them she bathes them and feeds
Lillian
them.
Gish's house.
Lillian
who was
Gish's
at the start of the movie.
Yeah, the face, the bodiless face at the beginning of the film.
She has a body.
She has
we
a
know
body
now.
She's here.
Yeah.
So we meet Rachel Cooper, and she is very kind of she's a little rough around the edges. Again, like she's like, I'm going to switch. And she's like, smacks at the kids a little bit, this reed to get them to move or whatever. But instantly, like, starts taking care of these kids. And just kind of like, it's established. She's almost like, it feels almost like she's a Fagin-esque character from like Oliver Twist. Like she's just keeping an eye on all these orphan kids.
Well, there's a line later where she takes all the kids into town. There's like 3 other girls there, 4?
Yeah. I think 3. I think there's 5 altogether once you get Ruby. Once you get Pearl and John.
Right. So she takes all these kids into town. She goes into like this store. They help her do her grocery shopping, and one of them's like, "Whatever happened to your boy? Your other kids or whatever?" And she's like, "Oh, he's in the war, or he died, or maybe I can't remember exactly."
He's in the war.
He's in the war.
Gone off.
He's gone off, and she's like, well, basically, she says maybe to John later too, of like taking care of kids is all I'm really good at.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna keep doing it.
She tells the store manager, she's like, I'm a tree whose branches can hold many birds. Like that,
which is a beautiful way of putting it and thinking about it. She's like,
good.
Look, there's all these kids out here roaming the wilderness who don't have parents really in the Depression, and I have the ability and the privilege to take care of them. So I'm going to.
I can help, and I'm going to.
I can help, and that's how she does it, and it's great.
While she's talking to the store owner, the oldest of the group, Ruby, who is probably like 14, 15?
15. I think they say she's 15, maybe. Yeah.
She maybe. She has a streak of going off into town to flirt with the boys. Yeah. And like one of the boys is like, he's like, "Hey, Ruby, come over." She says no. And he's like, "Well, what about Thursday?" And she says yes. And he turns to her. He's like, "Old lady thinks she comes in for sewing lessons on Thursdays, but she's coming to see me."
Yeah.
And we get a few more scenes of just like John specifically like learning to warm up to her a little bit.
Yeah, she tells like a story from the Bible about Moses, and he's like outside, but she knows he's listening.
Yeah, and the kids instantly draw the parallel because she's like, and they send him down the river in his little. I think she describes it as
she says as a skiff, and she says, "Do you know who was in that skiff?" And they go, "John and Pearl," and she goes, "Not this one." Dumbass.
I just think that's so cute. I just love that little moment.
Yeah. The youngest girl.
Everybody else goes to bed except for John. And she tells John, she's like, "John, fetch me an apple. Get one for yourself."
Yep.
And he comes back. He's like, "Can you keep telling me that story?" And she's like, "Yeah, of course." And it's just, again, there's this lovely little moment where she's telling the story and he's asking questions. And she's sitting in her rocking chair and he's standing next to her. And he just ever so tentatively, like, reaches out his hand and rests it on hers.
Yeah.
And she like interlaces her fingers with his. And he won't look at her. Like he's just looking down the whole time. But just that slow, tender, just like we haven't seen John ask for affection from anyone. No. And it's just, again, another moment that almost makes me cry.
Yeah.
This kid.
Well, and again, like he's been playing the man of the house for so long at this point that like, it's now he gets to be a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a really nice, I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's a very nice version of a side of what I call hand-holding cinema. Of like, I love shots of people slowly holding hands, and usually it's in a romantic sense, but I love that you mentioned that because I don't think I'd noticed that. But that's a really,
because it's not like,
really
it's
nice
just a wide shot. It's the two of them. It's a double. Yeah. And it's just, but if you just watch for it, he just very slowly really nice. Just reaches.
Oh, and I love that.
She doesn't even like move her hand. Her hand is like laying upright.
Yeah.
With her knuckles facing upwards, but she just opens her fingers a little bit and his kind of slip in between hers. It's really lovely.
Thursday rolls around.
Rolls around. Ruby goes to town. Teen boys working up the courage to go talk to her. As he goes to talk to her, Powell steps in between the two of them.
Yeah.
And he says something along the lines of like, "Oh, you're up at the Cooper's place, aren't you?" And she's like, "Yes, sir." And she's like, "Buy me an ice cream?" Says, "Sure." So he takes her inside.
But the teen boys kind of razz him a little bit too.
They do.
Like, "Preacher, what are you doing?"
Yeah. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Off, kid."
Yeah.
And I think there's another moment where he almost kills somebody. Like he takes a knife. It might be here.
I think it is.
Where I think he like flashes the knife, but nobody sees it.
Yeah, something like that.
And then like something, so he gets brushed inside or something.
Also,
there's another moment.
I also love this little part of town where, again, this unreality, this small street here is like a drugstore and like some magazine racks outside, but there's like these neon signs that just say like drug magazine, and it just feels like the most bare bones version of what a street
Well,
would
again,
look like.
it's in the same way that you were talking about with the river. This is not hiding.
Well,
the fact that it's set.
Again, it's unreality. It's like this. It's creating this weird quality that I really love about it.
Yeah. So, so she sits down and has ice cream and kind of spills the beans. He's like, "Do you get any new ones up there recently?" She's like, "Oh, just John and Pearl." He said, "Oh, really? Oh, good to know." And he says, she's like, "Do you think I'm pretty?" He's like, "You're the prettiest thing I've ever seen." Add on top of the fact that he's already a murderous, child harming creep. Yeah. And now you have this weird like undertone of just, obviously I think he's just working her for information, but it also just is so creepy and gross and I hate it.
It is.
So she comes home and confesses to Miss Cooper what's happened.
And Miss Cooper's like, "Well, was it their paw?" And she's like, "I don't know."
She's like, "Yeah." She's like, she was asking about John and Pearl. And she's like, "John and Pearl? That's weird." Because at a certain point, she asks John what happened to his parents. And
John had said they're both dead. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that."
Yeah.
And so the next morning, Powell rides up to the ranch to take them back. Pearl runs up and hugs him immediately, but John is standoffish. And the whole time, Mrs. Cooper is like, "Okay, they were in really rough shape when I found him." He's like, "They ran away, like, their mom." Her mom took them and she brought him to these awful places with her, gambling dens, and she's got a drinking problem. I can't imagine everything they've been through, and I'm so glad they got away from her. Like, I've just been trying to find him. And she's, again, like, I might almost start crying when I talk about it. She's so good. She's so standoffish about it, and she looks to John. She says, "John, is this man your pa?" She says, "No."
Or no, she says, "John, why don't you go and why don't you go and like hug your paw or something?" He goes, "That ain't my paw."
That ain't my paw.
And then she goes, "Yeah, and he ain't no preacher neither."
She goes straight in the house and grabs a gun. Like she goes inside. Powell goes for the doll. John grabs it and he scurries underneath. He scurries
under the house.
Powell pulls out his knife and
tries to crawl in under him after him. And she goes back out with a rifle. And like points it at him and like whistles and pokes him with it, and he comes up and sees it, and then he runs away and he scampers away like a little Looney Tunes character, and she shoots at him and he goes like, "Ow!"
He's like, "I'll be back." No, that's later.
Oh, that's later. Sorry. Yeah.
He goes, he's like, "You meddler, you whores of Babylon, like I'll be back. Like,
you haven't seen the last of me."
Dark.
Yeah.
He specifically says that he's going to come back when it's dark.
Yeah.
And
great plan, Harry.
Yeah, great plan, Harry.
Tell him when you'll be back.
That night, he comes back, and all of the kids are huddled into a group in like the kitchen sleeping, where it's it's safe and she can keep an eye on all of them. And again, you get the craziest shots in this movie that I love so much. Is he is just standing just outside the fence. He's leaning on the fence, like not in the property line, but fully just there, just outside, and he's doing his singing or whatever. And you see him, the shot cuts. You see him in like a full shot, and then it cuts, and you get this profile silhouette of Mrs. Cooper in the rocking chair with her shotgun.
Yeah.
Just fully in silhouette with him in the background, just walking back and forth. And it's just, that image is insane. That image is so good.
He's singing Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. She starts singing, but she instead of singing just leaning, she sings Lean on Jesus.
Yeah, she like takes the duet harmony part.
Yeah.
And it's just, I don't know. It's such a strange vibe in that scene of just like the standoff of like two opponents.
Yeah.
Who's going to make the first move? We're going to sing together. It's this weird eeriness going on.
Yeah.
Ruby comes out because she is like, she's still pining after this creep.
Yeah.
The whole time. But she brings another really cool shot that I don't know how they like lined it up. Is you see him through like the screen in the door, so he's a little bit like he's a little bit obscured, and Ruby comes down with a candle, and the candle lights the screen
porch
up.
area in the screen.
Yeah, it lines up the porch, and you can't see outside for half a second. And Cooper's like, "What are you doing? Go to bed!" Like she blows out the candle, and he's gone.
He's not there anymore, which is so good.
And she literally like gasps. She's like, "Oh, everybody, get everybody downstairs, like into the kitchen now." And so they get all the kids into the same room, and you hear him just taunting them from outside. Yeah. He's like, just give me the kids, give me the doll, like it's all gonna be fine. When he comes inside and he's in the room and a cat spooks him.
Yeah.
And when the cat spooks him, like he turns, she shoots, and she like gets him. She clips him somehow, and he lets out his like Looney Tunes.
Yeah, that's what it is.
And goes like skipping out of the room, like hopping in pain, and he runs outside and he goes for the barn. And Miss Cooper runs to the phone.
She has a good line here too.
Yeah, she runs to the phone and she's cranking it, and she's like, I need state troopers down here. I got something in my barn.
It's so good.
It's really funny.
Yeah. And the next morning, the state troopers arrive and they bring him out of the barn. And it's a real interesting ending.
Yeah.
And again, this isn't like the complete ending, but basically they bring him out and they're arresting him. They throw him to the ground, and we get a repeat where John goes, "No, don't." And it's and I understand it. I understand that he's reliving his father's arrest.
Yeah.
And he runs up and he says, "Take it, take the money, I don't want it." And it's actually a really good ending because it's a really good final beat for him and Harry Powell, because I think on my first watch I was like, he's getting so confused by this happening again that he thinks he liked Powell. No, that's not what's happening here.
No.
He's reliving his father's arrest and he's throwing the money back at his father.
Right. He's saying to his dad, he's like, "Take it back. It's too much. I can't. It's too much."
Too much, which is, man, a brutal thing.
The weight that is put on this. And also, I need to dial back really quick because I forgot the best line in the movie is while Lillian Gish is sitting out on the porch, keeping an eye on Powell.
Yeah.
There's a barn owl and a rabbit that she looks and she spots, and it cuts back and forth between the two of them. And the owl swoops down and you hear a little like scream from the rabbit as it gets caught. And she goes, "It's a hard world for little things." And just, that line decimates me. And I just think about it in context of the whole movie. And
and is like, once again, get back to that idea of like what children, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, just had to throw that in there.
No, good call bringing that back.
But so you have this moment with him, which again, I agree is a really good moment of him just kind of talking to his father as with Powell as the stand-up, just throwing the money at him. He's like, "Just take it. I don't want it. I can't. It's too much. It's too much." And they take him away.
And then it's Christmas time.
And then it's Christmas time. And this is where...
Surprise, this was a Christmas movie.
Surprise, Christmas movie. This is where I rub up against the movie a little bit.
Okay.
Which is, we're in the courthouse, and the prosecutor is like, "Young boy, can you tell us, like, point to the court, who's the man who murdered your mother? He's just over there yonder." And he won't do it. We never see Powell. He won't look at him. The camera doesn't show him, but he just looks down at his feet and he doesn't say anything. And I think it's just a summation of just how traumatized he's been by this whole thing. I think I read it as he's terrified of what's going to happen to him. He's terrified of what Powell's going to do to him if he says anything. And just, if nothing else, it just shows us how horrendous this whole experience has been on poor little John. And they say, "All right, little fellow, take him away." You see, they send him off with Mrs. Cooper and say, "Merry Christmas to all of you. Stay safe out there."
Yeah.
And then meanwhile, you get this intercutting with like the gallery there at the trial, which includes Mr. and Mrs. Spoon.
Yes.
And Mrs. Spoon Icy has gone full heel turn and is, basically like, we always knew he's a terrible person. He's a wife murderer,
they call him
Bluebeard.
Did you know Bluebeard? Do you know?
I did. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know. I had to look it up this time.
You didn't
I hadn't
know the
caught
reference?
it before. I had no idea, so that was fun.
Do you want to tell me what you found?
No, you tell the reference.
It's basically just it's a very old story, not a fairy tale, but it is one of those like folk tale stories of like essentially the first serial killer. It's this guy who marries women, murders them.
Yeah.
But it's become a part of like the cultural zeitgeist in such a way that like it makes sense for these people and like the Depression to be referencing the story. But yeah, so they're all counting Bluebeard, string him up, lynch him, like we want him hung and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And poor Mrs. Cooper's just trying to keep her children safe from all this. Like they go to like the ice cream parlor nearby and are getting a treat. and the crowd like
The
mobs
mob
the ice. Yeah,
is
they all
moving
come
through.
up, and they stop, and Icy's like, "There's the children. There's John and Pearl. Like, oh my goodness, save the children!" You're just like fawning over these kids who clearly don't want any of this attention, and Mrs. Cooper knows better and leads them out the back way.
Yeah.
And just this whole sequence, I don't know. It feels unnecessary to me. Of like it's building, like the crowd is getting angrier. They've got torches, they've got axes, they've got pitchforks. Like
we also meet back up with the guard from the start,
right?
As they take Powell in to be executed, and they're like, "Hey, got another one for you," and he's like, "Great."
He's like, "This time it'll be a pleasure."
Yeah, which is like, okay, interesting that this guy got a little arc.
Yeah, weird little callback. But that's it. They put him in a car and they drive him away, and that's that. And
you
there's
don't really see him again.
We don't. And like, you could read whatever you want into it. Like, when I watched it the first time, I fully thought the mob was going to drive the car off the road and then just go like take him to a tree somewhere and deal with it themselves. But you never see any of that. He just disappears, and so does the mob.
Yep.
It just doesn't. I don't know. It's the one thing I rub against with this movie. I'm like, why is this here?
And again, I do rub into it a little. So then they go back to Miss Cooper's house, and there's a lovely little Christmas sequence where they're all getting presents, and they got Miss Cooper presents, and John feels embarrassed that he didn't get anything for her, so he goes and he takes like an apple, and he takes like some wrapping, like a decoration.
He takes the doily. He takes the doily underneath the like bowl,
and then he takes a clothespin from the Christmas tree, and he wraps it up and he brings it to her, and she is very nice about it.
Yeah.
And then she tells everyone, okay, go get your presents. They're all upstairs or whatever. And then she brings John his present specifically, and it's a watch. Not unlike the one that he wanted earlier.
Exactly.
And then I can't remember exactly what the last, she kind of talks to camera.
She does. That's the final aside.
Does she repeat the line? Or
she says something along the lines of like, "Blessed are the children," and she's like, through thick and thin, they endure. They abide. That's what it is. They abide.
That's
children abide.
And that's it. That's the end of the movie.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying about that last little sequence. I think it's, and again, I feel like you could cut the guard bit out of the start, and you could cut out this little bit here, like with the mob specifically. But also, I feel like it's just another element of like protecting children from kind of the evils of adults.
Totally.
It's just like one more comment of like, why would you, like, why are they, like, the children shouldn't be seeing this either.
Yeah.
Like it's just another kind of evil that the children have to, I don't know.
Yeah. I get why it's here for the children's storyline. I just don't think it goes anywhere for the Powell storyline. Like, I wanted there to be some confrontation there of just it coming to fruition in some way.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Like, it just goes away.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Like, it's not the end of again, it's still a 5-star.
You gave it 5 stars. Yeah.
But that was the one thing that I kind of rubbed up against, is that I'm like, I don't know what this is here. Especially because like that moment with the money is such a good closer. Like, you could end the movie there.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, yeah, that's a great ending. I like the Christmas ending. I like the little button. I like, children abide.
Yeah.
It's a nice little sentiment. But that's just the one thing that kind of stands out to me a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's Night of the Hunter.
Yeah, that's it.
Damn good movie, man. I don't know.
It's really good.
It's really good. And as we've talked about so many times on this podcast, we inherently shot ourselves in the foot by doing an audio medium for visual medium, because like so much of this movie is just what you're looking at. Like, it's just, you got to look at some of the shots in this movie because they're just gorgeous.
There's beautiful shots. One I wanted to mention is earlier. There's a shot, I don't remember exactly when it is, but there's a shot of the house. I think it's when John and Pearl run away after they've locked him in the cellar. It's like almost like there's like a fog about it, and it's almost like that famous shot from The Exorcist. Like, there's just such like a beautiful, like, dark and light kind of shot there.
Totally. Yeah.
Again, the river, the shot with Cooper on the porch. It's just a really well shot movie. The only movie that actor Charles Lawton is his name.
Yeah.
The only movie he ever directed, which is a shame.
It is a shame.
It's obviously, for 1955, it's pulling a lot from silent films. I think the cinematographer wanted to pull a lot from D.W. Griffith's work. which I'm not super familiar with beyond the racist movie.
Sure.
So I can't comment on that. But yeah, just a gorgeous movie to look at. Really haunting. You mentioned earlier something about the pacing. Do you want to get into that a little bit?
Yeah, just that like this movie's like 90 minutes in and out, right? Like it's pretty quick. And I just love the fact that it feels methodical in the best way. Like it feels very much like it takes its time for those moments of the river sequence and that quiet little moment with Cooper on the porch, and like it finds moments to breathe even though a lot happens in this movie. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
And like things are constantly moving forward. So I don't know, I just took note of that this time around, of like watching it after like a really long day, where like part of me is like, maybe I'll just squeeze it in like the day we record. Like maybe I've just had a long day, but I was like, I don't know. I'll lay down in bed. I'll turn it on the TV and just watch it. And just like was impressed at how much it kept my attention at that point of just being exhausted, but I'm still just like fully locked in on this thing and just keeps moving and moving and moving.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just kind of something that stood out.
Totally. Yeah. Is there anything else that stood out to you before we get into the criteria?
Okay, so my grand thesis for this film, and you and I have talked about this a little bit, but I've like, it's grown and evolved in the years since.
Yeah.
Which is, I think this movie is like one of the contenders for like the American fairy tale. Like if America has something to add to the grand folklore tradition of the world of fairy tales, I think this is it.
Yeah.
Because this film feels so of a piece with like Grimm's fairy tales and those kinds of stories of just, here is a transformative journey the children are going to go on up against this monster, this antagonist, which is that line that I noticed that you were bringing up of like, don't he ever sleep? Yeah. He's the boogeyman.
Yeah, he is.
He is a mythical monster. He's not a person in this movie. He is a supernatural force of nature, which just adds so much to that fairy tale quality.
Yeah.
Which something else you brought up, even though we were joking about it, that's why it was making me laugh. I was like, oh, this also still ties in. Icy Spoons is such a fairy tale name. Like all of these characters fit this broad stroke of the kind of archetypes you would be seeing in this kind of story. Yeah. And I love this story being told against the backdrop of the Great Depression and specifically like the American South, and how all of that just kind of bleeds into this sort of mysticism going on with all of that, of like that whole river sequence. It feels like it's this, like, I'm not sure how quite to describe this, because thematically it's not the same, but tonally it is. It feels like a musical number aside in the middle of like Snow White or Cinderella. Like it feels like a Disney movie slice in the middle of this, of like, hey, here is this very pretty, very haunting, very like magical realm of going down the river. And it's kind of spooky and kind of sinister in the way that those fairy tales can be.
Yeah.
But it also has this beauty to it.
I think those early Disney cartoons is a really interesting comparison with like the Snow White, the Pinocchio, kind of the Dumbo, like those kind of earlier ones of like, it has a similar feel to that people talk about of like, oh, there's something weird about those movies. Those movies are kind of eerie. Yeah. And I think there's just something that this encapsulates. I think a lot of the time with those, it's more of just like, oh, they're old. But I feel like with this, it's like, I don't know, it kind of taps into that. I think what you're talking about, of like this fairy tale. There's like a genuine kind of eeriness to children's stories that are meant to be cautionary tales, right? Like in a lot of the time, you know, of like, there are people out to get you if you are a small thing, right? If you are a little thing, there are big things that will try to get you. And I also think that this is up there for me with something like Coraline, as far as like children's horror movies that tap into something that, when children's media taps into it, is a surefire success at being scary. Totally. Of like, you are on your own against something that wants you. Like, and I think that that's something that can be so powerful in children's media that oftentimes today it feels like we don't really get into. But I think there's something about main characters being children and there being some sort of supernatural force after them that is so scary. And I mean, again, like you're saying, that goes back to Grimm's fairy tales. That's a Hansel and Gretel, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very good comparison. I really like what you said there, Parker.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just been on my mind a lot lately, and it's been kind of gestating for the past year. But then like this time around, I was like, oh, this is the Americana fairy tale, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it fits so much of that in so many ways that just I don't know. I just love that's just I don't know. That was something that stood out to me. What about you? Any things to add before we get to criteria?
I don't think so. I think I'm good to get into. Oh, okay. I'll also say this: there are like some performances in this. Again, like there's moments of Powell doing his Looney Tunes howl and cackle and that sort of thing. There's kind of like a sense of like humor to this movie.
Yeah.
Which also kind of helps. And again, just kind of like this, I think this unreal sense with like, again, like Icy Spoon, the way that she talks is so kind of over the top a lot of the time. And she has so many deliveries that are just silly, like silly deliveries. And again, there's like those noises that Powell makes that are kind of silly. But I think it just kind of contributes to the overall sense of like a dreamlike quality, like an unreal nature to it. That I think supports what you're talking about with the fairy tale thing. But yeah, I think
it's a good observation. I like that a lot.
That's what I've got.
Nice.
Let's dive into the criteria.
Okay, cultural and historical significance.
So this movie didn't do well.
No,
when it came out.
Not.
It did really poorly, and it was also not a huge, like they didn't spend a lot to make it. So it wasn't even seen as like a huge loss or anything.
Yeah, it just
came and went.
Yeah.
Didn't leave a huge, and then in the years since, it's kind of had it's come back strong, obviously, because it's a very good movie.
Totally.
But it didn't really leave that much of like an impact, except for obviously the love and hate thing, which, like you said, do the right thing, and also you can cut this out. Should have given you a cleaner cut for that. It also makes an appearance, that reference, in Doctor Who Series 7, Episode 1, Asylum of the Daleks. Amy Pond is doing a little photo shoot, and written in Sharpie, real shitty, is hate and love on her knuckles, and she like shows it off for the camera. She's doing a little photo shoot. Just love what Stephen Moffat thinks photo shoots might be.
It's incredible.
Anyway.
No, that's that absolutely stays in, because also there's the episode is more overtly referencing and satirizing Cape Fear, but there's there's an episode of The Simpsons that includes Sideshow Bob, and he has because they only have 4 fingers, The Simpsons, his knuckles are love, L-U-V, and hate with like a pronunciation over the A. So it's just hat and love, which is really funny. And then the rest of it is more specifically like Cape Fear beat by beat. But
Gotcha.
That's kind of their little nod, which again, we've talked about before. Can also be a metric we can use. Is did The Simpsons parody it?
Weirdly, The Simpsons comes up like every week. As two people who haven't really watched much of The Simpsons.
No, not much.
Yeah, great.
So what's your consensus on this point?
I think it goes to Citizen Kane. I think this movie is gorgeous, and it's doing amazing things with film and with shots and lighting, and like the craft of this movie is gorgeous,
sure,
and beautiful. But again, I don't know if it gets credit for that necessarily. I mean, it does. It gets credit, but I don't know if it like can surpass Citizen Kane. If like the most impact this movie made from its production was love-hate gags, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. Like I
think they're very comparable though, as far as just how they look. It's just that Citizen Kane did it in 1941.
And also has just had more ripples through.
Like,
yeah. So I would say so. I think Kane gets the point there.
Yeah.
let's jump over to, let's get the easy one out of the way.
Okay.
Did you connect with this? Like, how well did you connect with this? Did you like personal preference, you know?
Yeah, I connect with this movie a lot. This watch, I was a little distracted. I had a lot going on in the back of my head. So I wasn't able to like fully be like, oh, I love this the whole time. I was just kept kind of finding myself kind of thinking of other things, but it still held my attention.
Sure.
But like, you know, the first time I saw it, and then the second time when I saw it with you, like, it connects and it hits. And I don't know. I love watching a movie with you where there'll just be a shot come up and one of us or both of us will just go, oh God.
Yep.
And this is one of those movies that I remember distinctly was like, Jesus Christ, how'd they do that? That's amazing to look at.
Verbally losing our minds together. That's always such a good time.
And but emotionally, obviously this works very well for me. I mean, I love, I love, and I didn't really mention it earlier, but the relief and the sense of just, like, the relief when she says no and he ain't no preacher neither is incredible.
Yeah.
The warmth and like the relief, because you've been so tense this whole movie of no one is taking care of these kids. No one believes these kids. And when Birdie does, he's not an incapacity to help these kids. And then for someone to just finally turn to him and go, and like when he's like, that ain't my pa, and she's like, you're right. And also he's not a preacher. I'm gonna get my gun. Like,
I see through everything on this guy.
It's something that's so rare. Like, rarely does a movie create that sensation in me of just being able to relax and just be like, and I want to cry just out of relief for these kids that someone is on their side.
Yeah, somebody finally believes them.
So yeah, the point goes to this more so than Citizen Kane, which I have a hard time connecting with historically.
Yeah, I just hard ditto to everything you already said. Like, this absolutely connects with me both times I've watched it now. I just really, really love this movie. I just think I don't know. Like I said, there's something very tender to me about like kids in distress movies. Just like get me just feeling very anxious, and that relief that comes of like, oh, there are people who care about them. There are people who are going to help them, like all those things. I just love all that. So,
and also when you saw it as a kid, you were terrified.
Yeah, it scared the shit out of me. So can't say that about Charlie Kane, can I?
You were terrified of...
I wasn't scared of Citizen Kane.
The idea of your mom having to come in because you started crying in the middle of the night. Parker, what's wrong? I had that dream again. Parker, we've talked about this. Citizen Charles Foster Kane isn't under your bed. Orson Welles isn't in your closet.
Specifically the Orson Welles from those wine commercial bloopers. He just comes out of the closet.
Oh no, it's Orson Welles from those wine commercials.
Oh no.
12-year-old Parker would be familiar with those.
I would be, yes.
Oh no. It's Orson Welles from those wine commercials.
Oh my.
You talked like that until you were 15.
I did. I didn't.
And then you started talking like Matt Smith's Doctor Who. Okay.
Look, I have phases, all right? Leave me alone.
All right. So second criteria, how well everyone knows the deal. How well is this movie doing
what it's trying to do? What do you think?
I think it really works.
I think so. I think it absolutely
is. A better job than Citizen Kane is the real question here.
That is a good question.
And
a piece of evidence I'm going to bring to the table here really quick.
Yes.
Is that when Charles Laughton initially met with Lillian Gish about why he wanted her for the part, he replied, his answer to her was, when I first went to the movies, because she was a silent film star, like that's the big crucial piece of information about this.
Yeah.
He says, when I first went to the movies, they sat in their seats straight and leaned forward. Now they slump down with their heads back and eat candy and popcorn. I want them to sit up again. So that is the mission statement of this movie, is he wants audience members locked in. He wants them leaning forward. He wants them fully engaged with the thing that they're watching.
Yeah.
So, with that presented, I think this movie hits that out of the park. Because literally,
Yeah.
I was playing it. I was teeing myself up. I was ready. That was my experience. I had everything going against myself. It was 11:30 at night. I was lying in my bed. The lights were off. I have fallen asleep more times than I can count watching movies like in that exact same space and position, just lying down and be like, okay, I'm watching this, but I think I'm just going to doze off, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, I was like, I'm going to refresh my memory a little bit. I'll go to sleep. If I need to go pick it back up the second half of it tomorrow, I will.
Yeah.
I could not go to sleep watching this movie.
Yeah.
I was fully locked in on this thing. And like, even the couple times I had to like get up to go to the bathroom, I paused the movie, which I usually don't do if I've seen the movie, if I'm just trying to get through it. Like, just keep it on and turn it up a little bit more so I can hear it. But pause the movie because I'm like, I don't want to miss anything. I want to watch this. I want to be fully engaged. So I think he absolutely achieved what he wanted to achieve. Audience sitting straight up, leaning forward, engaging with this thing. I think it's doing a better job of that than what Kane is trying to accomplish. We've been doing this for 9 months now, right? And I've been thinking a lot about like, what is Citizen Kane trying to do?
Yeah.
Based on all of the context and what I know about it and the reading, I think it's trying to be a send up of Hearst. I think it's supposed to be a diss track on Hearst. And I think it does an okay job of that.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think it's doing what it's trying to do, sure. But people don't remember the movie because it's a diss track on Hearst. They remember it because it's Citizen Kane, because of this influence it has on specifically filmic technique. Like, that is why the movie's remembered, rather than, I don't think that's what Orson Welles set out to do. I don't think he sat down and was like, I'm going to make a movie that is going to pioneer film techniques. Because there are people who do that. Like James Cameron makes Avatar specifically because he's like, I'm pushing the boundary. That's what he is attempting to do. Yeah. And that is the only thing he does in those movies. For the record.
He's doing a good Oh no, Parker, if we ever cover Avatar, we have to give the point to Avatar.
Oh no!
Because he is pushing the boundaries.
He is pushing the boundaries. But all this to say, I think Night of the Hunter is doing a better job of what it's trying to accomplish.
You know what? I agree. You didn't have to convince me, but I agree.
We got him, ladies and gentlemen.
You didn't get anything, but I agree. I was already there, and you got me there, and I was already there. So
lovely.
I walked into the room, and you said, "You're in the room now," and I went, "I sure am."
I sure am. Okay, so 2 out of 3, according to our criteria, Night of the Hunter is better than Citizen Kane. Taking our objective, subjective setback.
It is. It is.
Yeah, duh.
It is. This is a really good movie.
It's a really good movie. Check this out, guys. It's really great.
You gotta check this out.
You gotta watch this movie.
Real spooky, real good movie.
Yeah, a really great way of opening up September, leading into some spooky vibes.
We're playing with it. You know, we're playing with the kind of scary times.
Yeah, Max was willing to indulge me because I begin my Halloween celebrations September 1st through October 31st. It's a 2-month ordeal for me. And he threw me a bone by creeping in a slight taste of some spooky times.
And I threw you 2 bones, actually. I'm going to give myself credit.
Oh.
No. Because initially I had put a different movie here that also leaned into the scary vibes. Mm-hmm. And then I saved you the trouble of watching.
I want to watch this movie.
No,
I want to watch this movie.
Otto Preminger's Bunny Lake is Missing. Everyone, add that to the list that we have of movies we almost watched that we didn't, including Brick and Space Jam: A New Legacy. Throw Bunny Lake on the list too. But anyway, we'll get to those. Not all of those. We'll get to 2 of those eventually.
Speaking of getting to movies, Max, what are we checking out?
So moving unfortunately away from the scary vibes a little bit. Okay. In my heart, September is still kind of summer. It's always like I love Parker indulging Halloween, and I love engaging in that with him, but I'm not a believer in that necessarily specifically, but I do love it, and I look forward to Parker. Don't get mad. I
look, all I'm hearing is that I lean on Jesus and you lean on the everlasting arm. That's what I'm gathering. One of us is of a pure faith.
Yeah, and me, I've formed my own twisted version with Halloween, which is that September is a weird in between of summer and scary.
And what Halloween do you subscribe to, preacher? I subscribe to the one worked out between me and fall itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So next week we are continuing our journey into little Americana folk tales of sorts by watching Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Yeah. And I'm excited about it. I've been wanting to watch this movie for months, and I just kept not getting around to it. So I'm excited.
Now you got a reason.
Now I got a reason. My podcast content, baby.
Content, baby.
So anyway, everyone, look forward to A Brother, Where Art Thou next week.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone so much for tuning in.
Yeah.
We appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time. Ooh.